Some of it you gon' like, some of it you ain't. Tired of hearing fools complaining in barber chairs and beauty shops.
This is Truf Bros Radio.
We don't have the data yet, but this is certainly welcome.
Scientists that are telling you they want to help you are the same ones invested in the company.
Please join me in welcoming Dr. Debra Furr-Holden to the stage.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I got a little bit moved hearing that introduction. I said, she's pretty awesome.
Dr. Judith Lightfoot felt worse than crummy after her second dose of the Moderna vaccine.
If you're not listening to the Truf Brothers, then the truth is in you.
Truf Brothers TV. Hello, everybody. Welcome to an incredibly special edition of Truf Brothers. I'm Ray.
And I'm Devon.
We are the Truf Brothers. We have a very special guest. I am just over the moon and just super excited to have this person on. I've been listening to her for over a year now as she's on my local radio station. On the Santita Jackson show. She is just incredibly awesome. She's the Associate Dean for Public Health Integration at Michigan State University College of Human Medicine. I am so proud to give you guys Dr. Debra Furr-Holden.
We usually have some applause now, but
yes.
Yes.
There
you go. Get in there.
Yes.
There you go. Enjoy that. Let that happen for you.
Thanks, guys. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited. Let's get it.
Oh, well, there you go.
Let's get it. Let's do this. We want to talk vaccines. Everybody will be checking into the show shortly. You'll be seeing a bunch of highs and hellos, and people are dying to speak to you. They got questions. We got questions. We want to talk about COVID. We want to talk about vaccines and everything, the way the vaccine is being disseminated throughout the public. We want to cover some of all of that. So the first thing I kind of want to get into right out the gate is, can you explain vaccines and how vaccines work? Because a lot of people definitely believe that, you know, these vaccines are going to give you a third eye, cerebral palsy, memory loss, and all that other stuff. How you doing, Jacqueline? That's our family starting to check in with you. So if you could, just out the gate, can you explain vaccines and how vaccines work?
Yeah, sure. So we got 3 vaccines out right now. One's an adenovirus-based vaccine. That's the new one, the Johnson & Johnson. The first 2, Pfizer and Moderna, are what's called mRNA vaccines. The whole big controversy was over these mRNA vaccines, right? This was new. We had never heard of that. We all heard of mRNA in some high school, biology or chemistry class or, something like that. But I want to be clear. The technology is not brand new. It's been under development for more than 2 decades. What happened is, when this new virus came out, which is an RNA-based virus, we accelerated the pace of moving that technology out into the marketplace. So here's what mRNA is. It's messenger RNA. Messenger RNA is the instructions inside of a cell that tells the RNA and DNA how to replicate itself, right? Imagine if you needed instructions for a photocopier to work. That's what it is. It's the instructions. What an mRNA vaccine is it lifts a piece of the instructions out of the viral molecule to tell your body how to make a particular piece of the virus. The piece that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine are getting the instructions for are what's called the spike protein. And we've heard spike protein. It's like, what is a spike protein? So I'll take one step back. This is called the coronavirus. Corona means crown in Spanish. And if you actually look at the picture, if you were to look at it flat, like in a microscope, it's round and it's got little spikes coming off of it like a crown. Those little spikes that are coming off are spike proteins. What those spike proteins are keys. They're keys to unlock your cell. That spike protein unlocks your cell and lets the whole viral molecule in. Inside of that molecule is the virus and the instructions that the virus needs to replicate itself. mRNA vaccines are taking a piece of the instructions to tell your body how to make that spike protein. The spike protein is not in the Moderna or the Pfizer vaccine. The Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine are the instructions on how to make that spike protein. Your body then makes the spike protein and develops antibodies for it and causes all kinds of other immune reactions. That's why you might get a little tired, right? So I've been vaccinated. People who get vaccinated get a little tired. You might spike a little bit of a fever. That's because your body's working and your immune system is doing what it's supposed to do. But the virus itself is not actually in the vaccine. So if people are worried about, well, what am I getting in this vaccine? What you're getting is probably the most just innocuous piece of the virus, because it's just the instructions. And those instructions are typically no good without the real criminal. The real criminal is that viral molecule that will replicate and take your body over. I saw this slide today. I might even pull it up if you want. It was a picture of a smoker's lung, the lungs of a 20-year smoker. And it was side by side to somebody who was battling with COVID. The difference was like mind-blowing, jaw-dropping. What you don't want is you don't want this virus in your body replicating and attacking your respiratory system and your immune system and your cardiovascular system. So the vaccine,
No, and this is why some people are like athletes who have had a bout with COVID are now saying that they can't run like they used to, or they don't have the endurance that they used to. It's because of the damage that the virus is doing to their respiratory system, correct?
Yes, and this is the thing I'm trying to explain to people. If you get the virus, and there are people, and we know this now, that were asymptomatic. And I even take asymptomatic with a grain of salt. Because remember, Brother Hughley, D.L. Hughley, said he was asymptomatic, right? He passed out on stage. He was on stage and passed out, and somebody had to run up and grab him. So was he asymptomatic, or was he really not listening to his body and attributed the symptoms that he had to something else? My daughter just recovered from COVID, my 19-year-old. She got COVID. Her two symptoms, she really only had two symptoms. She had a terrible headache and extreme exhaustion. And I said, we in a pandemic. Why don't you go ahead and self-quarantine in your room for a couple days? We'll wait 2 days. You'll get a COVID test, and we'll see what happens. She waited 1 day, went and got a COVID test. It was negative. Continued to have the headache and exhaustion. Got a little bit of the sniffles. I said, you got to stay in your room, because what you're not going to do is get me sick. And I had already been vaccinated at that point. I had 2 doses of vaccine. But I could still get sick. We'll talk about that, too, if you want to. She went back 4 days after her symptoms started, got another COVID test. It was positive. Mind you, on the morning she woke up to go get that second test, she had lost her sense of smell. But the only symptom she had was she was extremely exhausted and had a terrible headache. So, this whole notion even of asymptomatic is a tricky one, because I think what it is people aren't relating the symptoms that they have to this virus and this disease.
Right.
But what we do know is it works on you. So even if you think you're asymptomatic, people will talk about not having their wind afterwards, not having the same capacity to breathe. Even when she recovered, she was in quarantine, went into self-quarantine and then full-blown isolation for 2 weeks. We were talking when she came out of isolation. After about 2 or 3 minutes, I noticed she was breathing heavy. I said, baby, are you okay? She said, Ma, I just don't got the same wind that I had before this thing. And she still doesn't have it all the way back. And we're now about 3-4 weeks out.
Wow.
And she's 19.
Question. You said that you had already had the vaccination. Which one did you get?
I got the Pfizer, because that's the one that was available. That's the one that the option that I had. So it was
now that's
Pfizer,
the 2-shot, right?
Choose. Yeah, Pfizer and Moderna are both 2-shot. Those are the ones, they're both mRNA vaccines. They got 94, 95% effectiveness. They're the first two that came out, and it's a 2-dose vaccine. Pfizer, you get 3 weeks apart. Moderna, you get 4 weeks apart.
Okay. And before we go into the next question, everybody out there in Truth Brother Land, go ahead and send your questions in. We're going to put them up on the screen for the doctor to answer. Bring your prejudices. There's no answers. There's no questions here that are stupid. Bring all the information, what you think you know, what you've heard, rumors, anything. I want to get something clear out the gate. The doctor is not here to give you a sales pitch on the vaccine. She's here to give you facts. That's all she's here for. She's going to give you facts. You arm yourself with knowledge, and then you go out there and you make the best decision possible for you. But she's not here as a spokesperson for the vaccine. Are you getting any vaccine money, Doc?
And not only am I not getting vaccine money, I wouldn't take vaccine money. Because here's the thing. I'm not telling anybody to get the vaccine. So another personal story, my oldest daughter is pregnant. She's now she's just a day or two shy of 16 weeks pregnant. I looked at the limited data that was available on vaccines in pregnant women, and my logic can't wrap my head around. You can't get the vaccine if you're under 16, but it's okay for I'm going to give y'all the gender reveal right now too, for my granddaughter who's 16 weeks in utero. So I know, right, baby girl. So if you can't, if a 8-year-old can't get it, how is this safe for my 16-week in utero granddaughter? So I looked up the data. I looked at the experts. The expert in this area would be the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists.
Okay.
They have said we recommend pregnant women, if they have the opportunity to get the vaccine, that they get it. I looked at the limited information that they had about it. Do I trust ACOG? It's called ACOG, American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Yeah, it's funny. My aunt used to work for ACOG. I used to hang out in the ACOG office in D.C. when I was a kid. But when we waited out as a family, and my daughter at the time was working as a patient advocate in the hospital, first thing she did was leave that job. I said, you shouldn't be a frontline healthcare worker working in a hospital setting, potentially interacting with COVID patients, because we don't understand the impact of COVID on a fetal development. And then me and my family made the decision. We said we just going to put a hedge of protection around her, because if there are negative consequences, we don't want to learn that at the expense of our baby girl's health. So we made the choice for our family that she is not going to get vaccinated, even though she was in category 1A, frontline healthcare workers, and had the opportunity to. We made a different decision for our family. Now you look at me, I'm 46. It made sense for me to get the vaccine when I had the opportunity, and it makes sense for us to honor protocols so that we can be clear that we're not bringing the virus to her. And even like I said, my youngest daughter, who's been very safe, she'd only been to one place. She went to the gas station. She went to the gas. That's the only place she had been in that exposure window, was to the gas station. So she had to have gotten it from the gas station, because she lives in the house with me and my son. My son tested COVID negative twice, and I tested COVID negative twice. So, people have to, I'm not selling anything. I'm not pitching anything. What I am an advocate for is get your information. Let that information be valid information from a trusted, credible messenger, and then make a decision that makes sense for you. What bothers me is when I hear people saying things that aren't true or that don't make sense, because I don't want people to make decisions that are against their own self-interest, because we live in a society where, unfortunately, our skepticism and mistrust is valid and, to me, well-earned. Yeah. We have good reasons as Black and brown people to mistrust the medical system and society at large. We get treated like,
Yeah, and that was something that I was going to get into, because despite the skepticism, you got 25% of Black people, and I think like 37% of Hispanics that still saying they would take the vaccine, and that was back in October. So I think for me, I guess, like, what I wanted to say was that we actually conducted a poll on our Speak Your Truth page, and I wanted to get just get a idea of what everybody was on. And like 38% of the people said they would not take the vaccine at all, no matter what. You had 19% that said yes, 30% was undecided, and 11% had already taken it. Now, the skepticism for me is when I see people like Albert Burla and other people that, you know, actually, well, Albert Burla, for those who don't know, is Pfizer CEO, and he won't take the vaccine, or he said he wasn't going to take the vaccine. And at that time, he said, when he did say it was because he said he wouldn't cut in line. But I'm watching, you know, he is an essential worker, in my opinion. And what do you say to the people who look at that and say, well, if he won't take it, then it's no reason for me to take it because I don't trust it, like you was just stating before about the skepticism with us.
Well, probably because his white brothers and sisters have all cut the line.
There
He's
you go.
probably trying to stand on a higher ground and say, even though I am in a position of privilege and power as the CEO or lead executive at this corporation, I'll wait my turn. We do have some goodwill out here, but we have way more line jumping than we do goodwill. So I wouldn't make that mean too much, because watch this. Watch this. Former President Trump got that vaccine, him and Melania, before he left the White House. Notice that not really publicized. Notice that went real quiet.
Right.
That went real quiet. Now he claims he had COVID, got monoclonal antibodies, all these different treatments, et cetera, and he quietly got that vaccine and then went on down to Florida like nothing happened. What I find really interesting is that there was this big push. We want black people to get it. It's gonna be, save you, and it's gonna be so good for you. And then this narrative was shoved on us that it was about Tuskegee. Oh, they don't want to get the vaccine because of Tuskegee. But in every city across the country, you got black and brown people stuck in the maze and the bottleneck of wait lists. Like how you said, 11% had already gotten it. You said about 30% were a yes. And here's what's really funny.
Yeah.
The people that were a no, some of them weren't a hard no. They were a no for now. A lot of our no is let's see.
Yeah, they had it was 30% that was undecided on the fence, and 38 was just like, no, I'm not. Yeah. So I mean, that you can go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't want to jump in front of that.
Well, the 38 that said no, I'm not. That's like almost on par with the national estimates. About 30% of Americans are in that no, hard no category. So there are a lot of people still grappling and still trying to figure it out. And I tell people, you need to do that work. That's why I don't tell people to take the vaccine. Because if you take the vaccine, and literally a colleague in Flint who was very much a hard no, got the vaccine, I promise you 4 days later, he tested COVID positive. He called me, Doc, we got a problem, woo. I had to have gotten this from the vaccine itself. I trusted you. I said, whoa. Let me make something real clear for you, brother. You are the captain of your health team. I never told you to take the vaccine. And I can guarantee you didn't get COVID from the vaccine. It's biologically impossible. And you know what he said? Well, I haven't been around nobody. So where else could I have gotten it from? I said, you went to get the vaccine. And it's my understanding right now from looking on your Facebook that you had some people over the other day. I'm just looking at what you posted on Facebook. Somebody lives with you, so you have been around people. I know, but none of them are positive. None of them are positive yet, or none of them have tested positive because they haven't been tested. Who else in your house has been tested? Lo and behold, he's now identified the source of his exposure, and it was not the vaccine. So I don't want to be on, I'm not responsible for anybody's health or their health decisions. I will give them the benefit of all the information that I have, but people got to make that choice for themselves. What I'm concerned about is the fact that there was this so-called big push for black and brown people to get the vaccine because we were so hit so hard by the virus. But then in reality, what happened is we've been marginalized and people have shoved our grandmothers and us to the side and jump to the line. There's a whole movement afoot. Wealthy folks think it's funny to go to the hood to get the vaccine. We had a vaccine site in my county, at a black church,
Yeah.
and 98%
Yeah.
of the people who got vaccinated were white. How does that happen?
Yeah. Yeah, that's going on in California and some other places as well, because the majority of the vaccine that's being disseminated through people is through community work. So now they're coming in, slipping through. You was talking about Donald Trump. Marco Rubio was not quiet about it at all. He talked crap about the virus, about wearing masks, about this, that, and the third. And as soon as the vaccine was available, he literally pushed kids and old people out of the way to get that shot. He wasted no time with that. So when you're thinking about these things, I want to ask, what's the difference with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine? How does that differ from the other two? And also, I wanted to ask you, when people tell you all of this stuff about vaccines today and why they don't believe in any vaccines, is there any concrete proof that vaccines are so dangerous and they're so different today than they were yesterday?
No, quite the contrary. I think vaccines have gotten better over time, right? So a lot of people have asked the question, what if I have egg allergies or this, that? Old school vaccines required a whole different process. The thing about vaccines, a virus has one goal, and that is to survive, to thrive, to replicate. Viruses want to live. They like have a life all their own, but they can't live without a host. Viruses need a host. We are the photocopier for the virus. The virus cannot replicate sitting out on a table or on the surface of a piece of fruit. It needs a host. We have the machinery to replicate and reproduce the viral molecule. The same way our cells are turning over every 24 to 72 hours, the virus does the same thing, but it needs a host to be able to do that. And so without a way to reproduce the virus, it was more difficult to develop vaccines. So they literally used to try to grow vaccines in chicken eggs, right? Because there's in a chicken egg, there's a DNA and an RNA process happening as that, baby chick is being developed, etc. So if you have egg allergies and the vaccine that you got was built off of trying to grow the virus, because what we used to have to do is people used to actually get injected with some form of the virus. They would call it either a live attenuated virus or an attenuated virus. What they would do is they would take the virus, figure out a medium that they could grow it in, and then they would study it. And they would take different pieces of it out. They'd kill it off with either heat or a chemical and try to figure out a version of the virus that they could inject people with that wouldn't get them sick, but that would signal an immune response. And so you needed some type of medium to be able to grow the virus in, because the virus can't grow just out in the world on its own. So the process of even figuring out how to grow viruses back in the day, that might take 5, 10, 15 years in the past. That's why this new technology around mRNA vaccines is so transformative and can accelerate the pace of things, because we're not actually growing the virus. Once you get the genetic sequence from the virus, and we've all heard of the Human Genome Project, right? We have mapped the whole human genome. Once you get the virus, you can map the genome of the virus, and once you get the genetic code, you can do whatever you want with that genetic code. They can make now candidate vaccines within a week, because we don't have to grow the virus and inject people with some safer, less harmful version of a virus. We just figure out how to get your body to produce a piece of the virus itself that won't harm you. And I know that's probably hard for people to wrap their heads around, but people want to understand some of the current vaccines and the things that we got injected with as kids, which was a requirement for us to go to school, were way worse and had way more potential for us getting sick than the vaccines that are out right now for COVID. It's a whole different ball game, but it should be that way. Medicine should be evolving. Vaccine development should be evolving.
Okay, then the question becomes, and again, everybody out there, we want to get you guys' questions as well. But the question becomes, then why are all of these stars, anti-vaxxers, supposed doctors, and all of that coming out saying, well, if you get this vaccine, your child could get cerebral palsy or Down syndrome, or why are they trying to equate all these different supposed side effects, scary side effects, on these vaccines and apply them to every vaccine out there to make people say, well, I don't want to get any type of vaccine because I don't want to expose my son or my kid to Down syndrome or anything else.
Yeah, so I want to say two things about vaccines. One, only in very, very rare cases does a side effect from a vaccine show up years and years later. And I will leave that whole explanation to a virologist or an infectious disease doctor or somebody who's studying this in a lab. But there's very, very few and minor examples. Most reactions that people will have to a vaccine will show up either right away or definitely within the days that follow when you get that immune response that kicks in. There is a whole sort of background and a whole group of people, and it's mostly been linked to autism, where people will say their children were fine, and then I believe specifically it was the MMR vaccine that people were pointing to, which is measles, mumps, and rubella. After they got that MMR vaccine, something shifted, something changed. There is a whole school of thought that vaccine is linked to autism. I can't prove or disprove that. There's no real data. And if that were
there's no
actually
studies
the case,
being done about this.
Right. That was going to be something I brought up because it's I don't think, for me, just my personal opinion, because I'm one of them people that it's a hard no for me. I don't think it will work out and just in my favor. It's for reasons from what I've actually read, and a lot of people have gone off their experience of people who have received it, and not everything has been negative, but a lot of people just weigh on the side of caution, and because of that, you have people who are saying that, well, let me say this. What do you say to the people? Because I see a few that's actually in the comment section that's saying that, well, the clinical testing the trials haven't been long enough. The people who don't experience that, the people with the side effects, that have the numbing of the arm and the passing out and the blood pressure goes up and all of those things. And after you answer that, I want to ask you a question about herd immunity as well.
Yeah, sure. So it's not really the length, it's more the number, right? That's where we're going to see the variation. Not in how long they go on, but how many people participate. So we've now had, I don't know the number, but one of y'all can look it up real quick. How many? I know in my state alone, we've had 2.8 million doses of vaccine that have been administered, right? In the clinical trials, there were tens of thousands for both Pfizer and Moderna of people, which is very on par with the number of people who would participate in a clinical trial for a vaccine.
Correct.
So the numbers haven't changed. The only thing that's different is the time frame got shortened. But the reason the time frame got shortened is because we're in a pandemic. This is something that we haven't experienced in 100 years. And at 3% death rate sounds trivial. If you break that down further and you start to look at the death rate by age category, by pre-existing health conditions and some other things, and if you talk to people who've lost loved ones, there are families. There's a woman in Flint. Her husband had COVID. Went to the hospital. This was at the height of the pandemic. Hospitals are overcrowded. They sent him home. Said, you can manage this at home. Told him what to do, etc. He went home, continued to spiral down the drain. When he came back home, he actually infected his wife, and his 30-some-odd-year-old son. 3 days later, they have to take him back to the hospital. He dies 5 days later. 2 days after he died, his son gets hospitalized, and he dies a few days later, and the wife recovers. So when you talk to people, this is a real story. I just literally did a segment with CNN on this, what's her name? Jesus. That's
Soledad.
embarrassing. Yes. That's going to be airing in a couple days. I think might be airing tomorrow. So you'll hear the story and you'll hear it right out of this woman's mouth. When you hear stories like that, it gets very real for people. You know what I mean? And so, again, it's not about necessarily, there's multiple layers that are needed to combat this pandemic. And I will be the first to say our federal government fumbled big time. Many governors fumbled big time. Remember, the mortality associated with Ebola is way bigger than the mortality associated with COVID. The consequences, even if you recover from Ebola, are way worse. Ebola hit America. There was a completely different response to Ebola that got that thing arrested and under control. I was in New York when I'm an epidemiologist. I was in New York at a conference talking about the opioid epidemic. And all these people in New York, I'm looking in the local papers and they're talking about all these people are getting sick and all these people are getting hospitalized and hospitals are reaching capacity. This is like the first day of March. I went there at the end of February, first day of March. I'm like, how come I haven't really I've heard a little bit about this virus, but our president was literally calling it the China virus. It was called the China virus. By the time I was there for another 3 days, all my colleagues, people at Columbia were hosting this conference. Their university was like, y'all can't go. Y'all can't travel. They shut the whole thing down. I said, if this thing is taking over New York, I'm in Flint. I'm an hour from the Detroit airport. If this is coming in from overseas, Detroit has a huge international airport. I'm thinking Detroit, Chicago, Atlanta, LA, we're next. Little did I know it was already in LA and spreading in LA. I came back to Flint and shut my building down the next day. This was 5 days before President Trump declared COVID-19 a national emergency. He did that on March 13th. How is it that I was in New York at the end of February, hearing about this, seeing it, watching universities shut down when our own president wouldn't sound the alarm? So the way we handled the mitigation response was it was almost criminal. It was like a dereliction of duty. There's no reason even now that we should still be at the height of the pandemic. But we are, because we've had bad leadership. We've had bad leadership. And we've thrown money at a problem that actually required some expertise and some real leadership. But we don't have that. That's not what we got.
Yep. For everybody who's tuning in, we are talking with our very special guest, Dr. Debra Furr-Holden, epidemiologist. I got a couple of questions about the CDC and how the CDC and other government entities has handled this, but I want to go into clinical testing real quick, and I want to talk about the clinical testing, and I want to talk about the different phases that clinical testing go through. I think a lot of people know that they think that it's actually 3 different phases of clinical testing. They're gonna test the virus with people who already have been infected or who already have this condition. Is that right?
No. So vaccine testing versus medications testing are just a little bit different.
Okay.
Right? So if you're testing a medication, right? So let's say you have a new medication for hypertension. You have to test that. You want to first make sure that the medication will do no harm. Right? And then you got to see how well that medication works at actually solving the problem or treating the illness. That's a little bit different from vaccines. So you'd asked me a little bit earlier about herd immunity. The whole goal with herd immunity, and people get this mistaken all the time, the goal with herd immunity is not for people to get sick. The goal with herd immunity is to prevent people from getting sick in the first place. And some guy at Hopkins came up with some prediction that we were going to reach herd immunity by April. And I just, as soon as I saw that, I was like, this is completely ill-founded. It's ridiculous. Don't give people this false hope. It scientifically made absolutely no sense. Not only are we not going to get to herd immunity, the cases are continuing to go up. And when cases go up, we'll likely also see an increase in deaths. If not the rate of deaths, the absolute or total number of deaths will go up. And it's not going to go up enough for us to get to herd immunity. And even if we did get to herd immunity, it would be short-lived. And here's why. What we found out is immunity from natural infection typically on average is lasting for people for about 3 months. Yeah. So the immunity is only good for, and for some people it looks like it's about, maybe up to 5 or 6 months. But on average, it looks like it's about 3 months of protection that you get from infection. And when you
we got a question from Drea Coleman here. She says that the swine flu was a pandemic in 2009, 60 million cases. How come no one flipped out about that?
Well, I mean, so I'm not a swine flu expert, but what I can tell you is this is a little bit different. The death rate, and again, 3% is not trivial because it's preventable. It's preventable. And 3% is the total population estimate. Averages are a real tricky thing. If you look at an average, you might have an average. You can get to an average a couple ways. If something is 25%, you can get to 25% by this half of the people not having it at all, and this half of the people, 50% of them being infected. That'll average you out to 25% because half is 0 and half is 50%. Or you can have 25% in both groups. Or you can have 0 in a whole lot of people and 100% in a small percentage of the population. So I don't want people to be mistaken by that 3% number, because the rate is much higher for people who are older and for people who are already sick. And to me, again, I think it's egregious for us to say, it's no big deal, it's 3%, because it doesn't take into account that it's not 3% for everybody.
Exactly.
It's not 3% for everybody.
And just to bring a little bit of clarity to numbers like that, if 3% of airplanes crash, no airplanes would fly in the world.
Right.
If 3% of brakes failed in cars would be shut down. Just because you hear the word 3%, look, they just came out with an estimate because we've had over 500,000 deaths from this disease. So they're saying that 1 in 5 people have been touched by a death from this pandemic. That's what they're saying. Sure. Also, 1 in 5 people have herpes. And if 1 in 5 people was dying from herpes, everybody would freak out.
They would. And the number's higher. If you've actually had more than 5 or more sex partners and you're African American, the rate is actually 45%.
See?
45%. And I don't know.
But that's what happened when you drill down on the number.
5. Yeah. And so the only other thing I would say, though, about, because I get it, and people ask these questions, and I think they're valid, and I don't want to one-up tragedy or anything like that.
Exactly.
But when if you look at swine flu and the impact that it had globally relative to the impact in the U.S., it was very different. If you compare where we are with COVID in the U.S. compared to where they are with it in China, the very disease that our president called the China flu, we are struggling. This notion that this is not that big of a deal, or I want to make America great again and exercise all of my rights and freedoms, we will be giving way to variants for this virus unnecessarily. And just how they talk about the Italy variant, the UK variant, the South Africa variant, what's about to come out is going to be the US variant. Because these viruses mutate when they go from host to host to host to host to host. So a variation happens, a mutation happens when I get exposed, and then I give it to another 10 people, and those 10 people are living their best life, and then they give it to another 30, and then those 30 give it to however many they give it to. Once that takes hold, now all of a sudden we've got a legitimate variant, a mutation that has persisted, been spread person to person, and that only happens when it spreads. The mistake that we made is we should have stopped and stood still. People should have been resourced. Shelter in place was a tone deaf recommendation, in my opinion. It was a tone deaf recommendation because a lot of people didn't have the opportunity or the resources to just pause and convert their job over to Zoom and still collect their paycheck and keep the lights on and just work at home. Most people didn't, and a lot of people didn't have the opportunity to do that. So this is a little bit different. And this is something that is spread in air. This is something that people are breathing in and they're breathing out. So this notion about people, there's a whole world of hype that masking is so terrible for you and it's going to increase carbon dioxide or carbon monoxide and all this other stuff is a ton of crap. Surgeons wear masks for 8 to 16 hours a day, 4 or 5 days running, and they're fine. They're fine. It's a load of crap. And it's unfortunate because all of the resistance to facts and science have it be that we're still not only very much in the throes of it, but I don't quite see the end in sight. I don't see where the end is coming. When you've got things like what's happening in Texas, where the governor's like, we're over it. We need to get our economy back open and people should be able to do what they want to do. Like, we are far from out of it, but I think it's our American mentality. When we dealt with H1N1, when you went to other countries, people took that stuff very, very serious. We were able to do a better job because we had better leadership at arresting that spread here.
Right.
But the whole management of COVID was just a massive, massive fumble. Somebody said, oh, it's been here since October, LOL. Well, actually, it was even here before then. I have a very good friend and colleague who's an attorney. He does supply chain distribution. He was in China in August because they said, we've got this weird virus that people are getting and, people are dying from it and they're, down for a couple of weeks and we need to get more supplies and more this. He was there to deal with the supply chain distribution issues in China for this virus that they said, or some illness that was happening where they needed more supplies and they couldn't figure out how to get the supplies in quick enough. He went and met with them in August. Then they all had a convening in the U.S. at Disney World. What's the one in Florida? World or Land? What's the one in Florida?
World.
Is it Disney World?
World. Yeah.
At Disney
Florida,
World.
World.
And then they had an outbreak in Disney World. And in Florida. And he was not the vector, but his father was one of the first diagnosed COVID cases in my county and one of the first COVID deaths.
Yeah.
So this has been here for a while, and we knew, and our leaders knew, and they did nothing. And the notion that they kept it from us to protect us is offensive. It's offensive.
And leadership is just extremely important. Again, we registered our first case at the same time that South Korea registered their first case, and the way that they handled their outbreak, they were done and over way before we were. They were back to doing public activities again. They were having baseball with full stadiums again when we were having everything shut down. Thailand cases are just extremely negligible because of the way that they rallied around as a society and put the clamps on that.
Yeah, and so the need for vaccines and all these things is a function of the fumble. And I see somebody left. She said, I'm out. I can't something establishment black folks. Bye, sis. I might be many things. Establishment black folk, I am not. That is one thing I
There
am
you
not.
go. Exactly.
What I'm saying is real, and it's what I know, and it's what I believe, and it's built on something.
And speaking of that comment, we got a couple of clips that we're gonna run for you, but I want to ask you something real quick first.
Sure.
And it has to do with like what you just encountered. How do you disseminate information as a healthcare professional in a society that's so anti-intellectual?
Yeah, this is anti-intellectual, anti-fact. Like, most people don't really even care about the truth. They really don't. And I don't really fault people for that, but I also don't argue with people over fiction. You know, if somebody said to me, "You're a purple dragon," I wouldn't even respond. And I also don't feel the need to invest a lot of time and attention and energy in people who aren't interested. It's like, great. People go where they go to get their, information, and like, I'm okay with that. That's your right. You should do that. I tell everybody, you are the only one who is ultimately, at the end of the day, responsible and accountable for your health, because every decision that you make impacts your health. And if you don't know it now, you'll realize it as you age. We've all done something. Everybody has some scar on their body somewhere from some real stupid stuff that they did when they were a kid, right? Me in my house, we used to jump on the pillows. We take the pillows off the couch in the summer, and we go all the way up to the top of the steps. We had 13 steps, and we come flying down the steps on the couch cushions, the cushions off the couch. And I got a nice little scar here that I'll probably live with for the rest of my life that will remind me about the impact of doing that. I remember the first time I rode my big wheel down the big hill in my neighborhood, and my brother thought it would be funny to jump on the back, and that little cheap big wheel and the weight of him, the whole big wheel collapsed, and both of my knees were hitting the pavement. And when we were done, my knees were down to the white meat. You know, it's like, as a woman to have raggedy knees. I'm glad that happened when I was like 7, because it's healed over time. But we've all done things, that have impacted us in some way or another and impacted our health. You made the example about herpes. Who knew that one sexual encounter would give you the gift that keeps on giving, and then you have to now manage that? And it's manageable, but now that you have to manage that for the rest of your life, right? It has an implication for your reproductive health and your, sexual encounters for the future and all that other stuff. The vaccine is no different. That's why I want people to actually get their information. And if you don't have enough information to be a yes, or if you've gotten your information and you're a no, stand in that. But still be the captain of your own health destiny. Just because you choose no to the vaccine doesn't mean you still shouldn't be managing your own health.
Great. Before we go any further, bro, I know you wanted me to play a clip that we were supposed to post in the group a couple days ago. So, Tony, when you get a chance, could you roll the clip so bro can finally see this clip?
You don't want us on your television screens. You want us off of social media. And now you are telling my poor Black brothers and sisters that they should hurry. And you laugh at Reverend Jim Jones with Kool-Aid. This is the biggest dose of Kool-Aid that the enemy has ever offered. It is death itself, created by what you call warp speed. Anything that's warped is misshaped. Anything that's warped is crooked. So by rushing so fast to get something out, bypassing normal steps in a true vaccine, now God is going to turn your vaccine into death in a hurry. Since you love to take the vaccine, then eat death. You think you're running from death and that I'm inviting you to death. The man of God is not inviting you to death. I'm inviting you to life. We don't trust you. I think we should pool our resources and get what is necessary for our people and for others, because we cannot let you use your smile and your smooth words as you stick in our children with needles that contain death for them.
Yeah. And
Well, I'm gonna say two
what
things.
he's tapping into, what he's tapping into is a lot of people's angst and a lot of people fear. And I know, Doc, we've kind of talked about that before, and you have your reservations about the packaging and the way that the vaccines have been pushed by the government, and you felt that those were a mistake. But I would say that the Pfizer vaccine, the first thing that Pfizer said is we had nothing to do with President Trump program of warp speed. We didn't participate in it. We didn't have anything to do with that. I even believe that vaccine was developed over in England at that point, and they wasn't participating in the government program.
Yeah. So here's what I'll say that the brother touched on that are two important points that I will actually give him an amen on. He said, we don't trust you. And I feel like as Black and brown people, to just blindly go with, believe everything that we're told would be foolish. There is a certain amount of skepticism. There's a certain amount of questioning that's needed just to function. And we have good evidence, and I'm not going back 30, 40 years to Tuskegee. I'm talking about right now. If you look, African Americans, Hispanic, Latinx populations will report very different experiences than their white peers in the job market, in the healthcare sector, trying to secure housing, trying to receive certain entitlements or other programs. Like, we have valid reasons to mistrust systems and structures and institutions that by their very design were not built with us in mind. They were never built for us. Access to healthcare was a new thing for African peoples. We were not brought to America and provided healthcare. We were not brought here and provided with quality housing and all of those things. And there's legacy and contemporary manifestations of that. So the notion of mistrust makes sense to me. The second thing is that he touched on that I think is valid is resources. The vaccine is only one resource and a model to protect and preserve people's health. There are many other layers besides the vaccine that are not talked about, like the payroll protection program that disproportionately African American and women-owned businesses were left out of. Big businesses, white-owned businesses snatched all that money up so fast, there was barely any left for the little guy. And I've heard this, we talk about this on Santita's show. There are lots of white small business owners. Small business owners got left out of that. The average guy, the little guy, minority-owned businesses got left out of that money. So what were companies and what were people supposed to do when their livelihood was taken away because we're now on modified operation, shelter in place, and all of that? Our nation's wealthiest people, many of them have doubled their wealth during COVID. The fear of this pandemic has actually bred a lot of consumption. And it's really strange that some people have gotten really wealthy while homelessness, joblessness, all of that stuff is at an all-time high. I got a stat today. I won't speak it with any authority because it was something that somebody else said to me, but that 44% of African American small businesses have gone under during COVID. Even if half of that number is true, that's like disgusting. So there is this inequity in the distribution of wealth and resources. I asked the question of Dr. Fauci, of the heads of Operation Warp Speed, General Perner and Dr. Slaoui, how are you going to ensure equity in this operation? And which I think the whole naming of it is just completely ridiculous. So you just fueled people when you called it warp speed, right? And he's right. Something that's warped is bent, broken. And warp speed, when I hear that, it makes me think of Star Trek. I think, like something real fast.
That's
quick
right.
And dirty. On the, like who? I don't want something injected in me that you developed quick and dirty. Did you cut corners? Did you skip some steps? Like those are real and valid questions that people might ask. But this other thing, so fine, let's take our attention off the vaccine for a second. We should be demanding equity with all of the resources. So people are busy sitting around and shooting down messengers around the vaccine. Have you put the press on the legislators that you voted for to make sure that there's equity in this next round of payroll protection? What about enhanced unemployment? That extra $600 a week was transformative for a lot of people. Transformative. I know so many Black and brown people still waiting. They go online every day and look. Their enhanced unemployment from last time, they're either just getting paid from it or the system just flipped over and said that they had been denied.
Correct.
Where's the data on that? That's the kind of data that we need. We've disproportionately been left out of the whole pot of gold in this. We've spent trillions of dollars on COVID. So the overemphasis on the vaccine, yeah, of course, that's only going to fuel mistrust. So if people want to know what they can do and where they can be standing, stand for real equity. You know, I'm watching President Biden go around and make visits and, you know, kiss babies, and, you know, other legislators are going around and visiting some of the vaccine sites. What a waste of energy. What a waste of your highest calling. You are a legislator. You need to be making laws and making sure that those laws are being enforced so that the resources that are being rolled out are being fairly distributed to everybody. And that's not happening. So people spend their time, you know, dissing on people and, you know, coming up with conspiracy theories and focusing on that stuff. If you're a no to the vaccine, cool, be a no to the vaccine. But are you a no to payroll protection for your small business? Are you a no to updated ventilation systems in your kids' schools? Because let me tell you, it's a whole lot of jurisdictions where them schools, then they state of the art now. They took all that Corona money, all that CARES Act money, and got like real nice buildings, new AC systems, new heating systems, new ventilation systems, new furniture, thinned out the classrooms, renovated classrooms, did all kinds of stuff. While a lot of our schools that were already falling and in disrepair are sitting in disrepair, and people are out here dissing on people like me. That's what I think about that. You can diss on me all you want. You're wasting your time and energy. And people get so seduced, so happy to go to a rally and see. I wish President Biden would come to my community and stand at a vaccine site. I'm going to tell him, take your tail back to the White House and get a mandate for equity. Get a mandate for equity so my brothers and sisters aren't losing their businesses, so that my kids' schools get all the updates that you see in some of these wealthy white school districts, so that my nephew ain't waiting to get his enhanced unemployment for 6 months only to go online and it flip over and it be a no. So if you a no to the vaccine, great. Set that to the side. Let's fight for some of these other things. Because there's plenty of stuff that we could be devoting our time and attention to. I'll keep talking about the vaccine and sharing the information so that people have credible information to take their choice. But guess what? I honor the yes, the no, and the maybe so. Because at the end of the day, that's your health. That's your body. You got to make a decision that works for you. So I'm not even going to dog the brother because he said it. I don't trust you. This system has earned our mistrust. And he said something else critical, resources. And we do need resources. And we want our fair share of the pie. And we ain't never got it. And we need to be a demand for it right now.
Exactly. And just to, I guess for some people, they think that's the establishment talking. None of that sounded like establishment. And it's something else I want to tell you guys about this, sister. When Flint got poisoned, while other people was running out of Flint, this sister ran into Flint. She's been helping the people of Flint deal with this water crisis because the water hasn't went away. The water is still contaminated, and she's been in the forefront dealing with it. That's not establishment. Before you, Truf Brothers don't bring any establishment people on here. When we bring you somebody, we try to bring you somebody absolutely real. And we told you we're trying to bring you facts. We haven't told you to take the vaccine. My partner right here just said he ain't taking the vaccine. That's his right. Nobody is ripping him. Nobody is ripping any of you guys. If you choose not to take the vaccine, that's your choice. But it's better to be armed with facts than to just be armed with conspiracies. And I'm done with that.
And let me tell you,
I didn't like how they came at you, sister.
When the vaccine came out, I was a heck no. And literally, I don't give too much like energy to people. Literally, when I tell you, when I speak, I get on average probably 4 or 5 hate messages from people who call me a race baiter. White people love to call me a race baiter, which is crazy. Sure. And I'm like, whatever, sticks and stones. Literally, that's how I feel, sticks and stones, whatever. So I'm not like even worried about that. But I was a heck no. And I made no bones about it. I was a heck no. I was like, I don't know enough. I ain't seen enough. I did not realize that the data, hey, Betty Addison. I did not realize that a lot of the data and the proceedings from what's called the Data Safety and Monitoring Board, which is the independent entity of scientists who have no skin in the game, they're not supposed to, right, are reviewing data. Anybody that has research grants, I run a very large NIH, National Institute of Health funded center. It's called the Flint Center for Health Equity Solutions. I have a Data Safety and Monitoring Board because we have 2 projects in that center. One is focused on people dealing with addiction and in recovery. Another one is focused on helping to turn the tides on people with hypertension through physical activity and nutrition. And it requires a Data Safety and Monitoring Board. So the vaccines and the FDA has that as well. I didn't realize that all of that data was available and the reports and the summaries of those conversations was available. Mind you, the documents are dense, they're thick. I don't think a layperson it would make a lot of sense to, but it makes sense to me. So I actually took the time and I went through that stuff and I got my questions answered. And a very good friend and colleague of mine is the president of the National Medical Association, a brother by the name of Leon McDougall, African-American male physician. He went through that data as well. And he was like, the only question that we had honestly at the end of it was, there's nothing really biologically about race that really drives disease. The one question that we had was sickle cell disease and sickle cell trait is overrepresented in African Americans. There wasn't enough information in what was published to speak to. Most people don't even know if they have sickle cell trait. People know typically if they have the disease, they don't know if they have the trait. When I was coming up, all African American children got tested for the trait.
That's right.
So you knew they don't do that anymore. So we all got tested for the trait. And we thought, anything that would amp up your immune system, whether it be you get exposed to the virus, because understand people, if you have a reaction to the vaccine because your immune system has been amped up, you would be having a way worse reaction if you got the virus because your immune system is absolutely getting all the way amped up because it's going to need a much stronger response to deal with the whole virus versus just one little piece of the virus, the spike protein. So I want to make sure that people understand that. That was our only question because we thought this is something that is disproportionately in the African American community. And so we're still looking to get that question answered, but that question is going to get answered through ongoing pharmacosurveillance because we now have to monitor that. We won't really be able to monitor it for sickle cell trait because most people don't know whether or not they have the trait. If you're under 40, you probably would have no, maybe even under 45, you would probably have no clue. But, you know, people will know if they have sickle cell disease. So that was the only real thing that we came up with. So once I got that information, then I really had to contemplate for myself. And that was my process. I said, okay, I see the data. I have the same, you know, I think healthy level of mistrust of medicine, of healthcare, and of the society at large as an African-American female. I think I have a nice, healthy dose, well-earned, healthy dose of mistrust. And I grappled for probably about a month with the decision. And then I made the decision. And honestly, when I found out my daughter was pregnant, that was the thing that tipped the scales for me.
Yeah.
That was the thing that tipped the scales. I thought, I'm going to do everything that I can to put a hedge of protection around her. But that's me.
Yeah.
That made sense to me. That might not make sense to you. Do your own process. Make your own decision. I'm just here to give you the information.
And you gave a boatload of information, and I want to thank you for coming on with the old Truf Brothers. We definitely appreciate it, and you are welcome back here anytime. Anytime you want to come and say anything, you want to talk about anything other than that, other than medicine. Come on, we can talk about your hair if you want to. Whatever you want to do, you feel free to come on and hang out with us. And this was a very special show. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I hope that this answered a lot of questions that you had and will help you to further make the best decision that you can make about your health.
Yeah. Like I said, what you did was you basically gave everybody a chance to make their own decision. And what Bro was saying earlier, I don't think that nobody's decision, whatever it is, because nobody's trying to sway you to make anything you want to do. Whatever decision you make, it's your personal opinion. Just the only thing you can do, I would suggest, is just take care of yourself regardless. Let that just be the thing. You just want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and being safe with no matter what you're doing. That's all I can ask of people.
Can I leave people with one other bit of advice? And I typically don't give unsolicited advice, but there's a real opportunity for people to really take the reins of their own health. And so the human body is an amazing thing. And I will acknowledge that the lion's share of people who even will get COVID, and I've heard the stories, and I know it's been scary for some people and they've recovered and some have long-term consequences, but the human body is an amazing thing. This is really an opportunity for people to tune into their bodies and really practice treating their bodies well. And so this is going to sound real basic, but I give people 3 bits of advice. If you could do, they say, Doc, if I could do one thing that would really give me a fighting chance if I did get this virus, what would that be? And I tell people it's 3 things. 1, eat the highest nutrient-dense diet that you can afford. This is really the time, if you ever cared about cleaning up your eating, get your eating cleaned up to the best of your ability, right? And high nutrient-dense foods typically don't have labels. You got other foods that are very high in calories and fat and salt, but very low in nutrients, like chips and soda. And my friend calls chips the soda of food, right? Whole foods, lean meats, whole foods, whole grains. I started the sea moss shakes. I don't know, feel like my skin's a little bit better. I got a little bit of extra zep in my step. I just practice eating the best diet that you can afford. Number 2, sleep. Get good sleep. Sleep is a opportunity for your body to repair, restore, and recover. If you are not getting good sleep, your body is not getting that chance to refuel and recharge. And if people don't know, sleep deprivation is cumulative. So if you rob yourself of sleep night after night, it builds up and you will be dragging. And whether or not, if you're young and it doesn't seem like it's taking a toll, know that you are weathering underneath of the skin. And then move your arms and legs 30 minutes every day. The more you move your arms and legs, it just gets your body in fighting shape. And if you were to be exposed to the virus, if you've been moving your arms and legs for 30 minutes every day, you've given your body the best chance. Now, I wouldn't encourage anybody to go to the gym. If you wasn't going to the gym before now, I tell people I mop like nobody's watching. I mop my floor like I was at a mopping competition. I'll turn the music on, and sometimes I'm on Zoom and I just start doing my little thing, You know, I'm from DC, so I throw some go-go music on. I might be on a Zoom, literally just dancing. I'm just mindfully trying to move my arms and legs every day for about 30 minutes. And then the last bit is just practice self-care, whatever that looks like for you. Make sure that you're well, that you feel whole, that you have the experience of love and being loved. I don't care if it's from a friend, from a loved one, from a neighbor. If you feel socially isolated, reach out to somebody. Sometimes you can shift your own attitude and your own experience of yourself by doing something kind for somebody else. You know, taking your neighbor's paper and throwing it up on their porch. I don't know, it was snowing. My son and I went out and used the snowblower and blowed our elderly neighbor's, walkway. But practice self-care. It's important. If you do those things, you give yourself a fighting chance, and you have the opportunity to emerge out of this better and stronger with health habits that will serve you in your life, even beyond COVID.
Free advice from the doctor.
There it is. And it don't get no better than that. So again, we thank you for coming on. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We will see you guys next week where we'll be asking the question, is it okay not to believe? We going there. And this has been a great episode. Again, we thank you very much. And everybody out there, join us next week. And we'll let you know that if you're not watching the Truf Brothers,
then the truth ain't in you.
Live long and prosper, people.
2 fingers.